Warning. The following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to the season 2 finale of Hot Takes with Billy Biz. Wow, it has been a long season, and we started with one of the most controversial movies of 2017 with Justice League, and I'm ending it with the most controversial movie of 2017, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. This is such a behemoth. This is such a big thing to take on. I had to call in a heavy hitter. This isn't just like as much as I love him, I can't just bring on a Joe Star for this one. I need the superstar destroyer of Star Wars experts with me, Mr. Joseph Scrimshaw.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored. That's a lovely introduction.
I am such a huge fan of what you and Jennifer and Ken have done with ForceCenter. You have such a interesting way, such an insightful way of looking at Star Wars that even sometimes things that I don't agree with or I don't like, I'm like, okay, but I can see that angle on it. So yeah. I'm hoping you're bringing that today.
Oh, I want to. I really want to.
I have to say, it's interesting that we're doing this one today because it's December 11th. So we're a week and some change away from Rise of Skywalker. Think about this. We are a week and change away from a new Star Wars movie.
So exciting.
The end of the saga.
Yeah, the Skywalker saga.
Number 2 trending on Twitter. The Last Jedi. So I just, real quick, just a top layer statement. 2 years after this, why can we not let this one go? Why are we still talking about The Last Jedi?
I think that it is, like you were saying, it is such a behemoth because, you described it as controversial. It's controversial whether it's even controversial. That's how controversial this movie is, right? Because, we're even getting back and forth on Twitter today that, well, this was a critically split movie. And critically, no, it wasn't.
Right.
Critics liked it. That's a whole different discussion. Well, fans clearly have different opinions, but how many? Is it a vocal minority who really hate this movie? Or is it about half of fans are kind of displeased and some stuff that, we're never going to fully know without huge studies dedicated to exactly how much.
It's I could stand out in the middle of maybe Universal City Walk and maybe try to get a day's worth of just asking tourists.
Right.
And I'm sure it would be
small sample size.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be much different than what is in my Twitter feed on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that it elicits strong opinions, right? And I think that's fine. And then as we're recording today, it is this very strange thing of people involved with Rise of Skywalker kind of bringing it up out of the blue and that being part of the conversation. So even today, the conversation is only partially about the actual film, and so much of it is the conversation about the conversation about the film.
Which I'm glad you brought up the cast kind of bringing up Last Jedi, because I think John Boyega's comments kind of, they stand on their own. He said what he said.
Yep.
I went and I found the exact article.
I read the whole article for context.
And it's exactly what it is. On the other hand, I saw a headline that literally read, J.J. Abrams admits Last Jedi choices were a mistake. So I clicked on that. They didn't cite where the article even came from. I found it. I read it. That is exactly the opposite of what he said. So, and I feel like this movie, and this happens a lot. This happens not just with movies, politics, everything, where a headline gets you, and then that becomes your weapon against whatever or for whatever without actually reading the words behind it.
Absolutely. I think we should all read the actual article instead of just going by the headline. And if the headline is about entertainment and it includes the words admits or opens up, you should definitely question it, because people are always trying to spin things. I always laugh about the opens up, because it'll just be like a red carpet and somebody will just yell at Hugh Jackman, "Do you like ham sandwiches?" And then the headline will be, "Hugh Jackman finally opens up about his lifelong love of ham." And he'll have just said, "Sure, yeah,
sure.
It's a good sandwich. Bye."
That's also the so-and-so is definitely going to be the next Batman. And then you click on it. It's like, had a lunch and potentially met for something.
Yes.
Yeah.
A 20-year-old handsome man with a good jawline might be Batman. Yep.
So
that's true.
The reason all of this we're talking is because I feel like that is kind of the smoke screen that has been just blinding us from actually talking about the movie. So today we are going to talk about, I kind of gathered, call it 10 of some of the most talked about criticisms of the movie. Some of them I agree with.
Yeah.
Some of them I don't. But I want to go through kind of point by point on a lot of these things and just get your take. Maybe you agree with some of them. Maybe you don't.
Cool. Cool. Can I throw out a kind of a big picture thing?
Oh, please
before
do.
we go into the point by point?
You are the Jedi Master, and I am but a sniveling Anakin.
Oh, no,
saying
no.
behind your back that you're holding me back. So
no,
please,
you
go ahead.
then I think that's an accurate analogy. You are the chosen one. You are the one with the power, and I should listen to you and ask about your feelings, and maybe you won't go down a dark path. So I think like some of the comments that Abrams himself was saying today was sort of wrestling with what is the big picture, what this movie is saying.
Sure.
And the thing that I encounter a lot in the discussion of this movie, when you can kind of get past the noise and just get down to, okay, we are truly talking about Star Wars fans who love Star Wars. There's no outside, I'm just mad at it for political reasons or social reasons, and you're just talking with people who I like Star Wars and people who want to like this movie.
Sure.
A lot of times it comes down to, well, it felt like Rian Johnson in the film wanted to subvert everything and wanted to say things don't matter, or that, I don't like that Luke hates the Jedi now, and I don't like the message that the past should just be killed. And the thing that I get really passionate about, which is why I wanted to bring it up as a kind of overall thing,
Sure,
is I feel like the movie does question a lot of the basic tenets of Star Wars, but it questions them in the same way like a hero's journey challenges a hero, so the hero can go through stuff and then come out the end and go, no, I know who I am. Here's my power. Here's my strength. And I feel like that's what Last Jedi does. It challenges basic Star Wars ideas in order to reaffirm them. I feel like I get just such goosebumps when Luke says, you're wrong about everything, Kylo. The Resistance is reborn today. The war is just beginning, and I will not be the last Jedi. That's Luke reaffirming everything. When you get to the end and you're watching a kid play with an action figure telling the legend of Luke Skywalker, to me, that is saying to fans, hey, if you've spent years believing in these characters, believing in hoping that you could be a hero like them, you're absolutely right to have done that. We're sitting in your recording room filled with action figures.
Yeah.
It's an easy joke to make fun of kids who play with action figures. Like, here's a movie that's like, all these ideas behind Star Wars, they really do matter. And we tested them in this movie. We tested, should you go and do something daring and dangerous? Should you see the rebellion and the Empire / First Order as, two sides, they're both kind of the same? Or should you believe in the mission? Should you hold on to hope when it's really, really looking dark? Did the Jedi make some mistakes? Yeah. Does that mean that they should just go away? No. I feel like ultimately the movie is really about reaffirming things, and I'm just really passionate about that. So thank you, Anakin, for letting me state that at the outset, because I think if there are people who want to like the movie more, I think that's a really good starting point to look at. What is the movie saying by the end? Even if I feel really, really challenged by moments, or don't like things, or feel like the movie's kind of thumbing its nose at me in the middle, just really pay attention to what it's saying at the end, in my opinion.
Oh, see, I knew I got the right guy for this one. I had Ken over here, and it was very difficult. He didn't want to do it, but I made him do all of his Star Wars movies ranked in order of his favorites.
Ooh,
which he's very good sport for actually doing it. And we were talking about Last Jedi, and I said, when I went into Force Awakens, I was so excited, and when I walked out, I am not physically capable of a cartwheel, but if I could, I would have cartwheeled out of the Galleria Theater. When I went into Last Jedi, same level of excitement. And when I walked out, my wife was like, so what'd you think? And I said, And I think she took it as like, oh no, he was let down. He was disappointed. But I think, was probably I don't know the guy, but I feel like if I saw Rian Johnson right after that screen, he's like, "What'd you think?" And I said, I gotta sit with this for a minute. I feel like that's what he would have been like. Great. Like,
yeah,
that's exactly what I want.
I think so. I was reading an interview with him today where he was talking about like, yeah, I really want to, whenever I make a movie, I want to have a theme and I want to look at it as much as possible and challenge it. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're walking away from a movie going, I need to think about that a little bit, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. So that's where I started with this movie, and repeat view. I think more than any other Star Wars movie, I get something new and different from this one every time. But it is challenging. So let's talk. Let's get a little granular now. Let's talk about some of the overall things. This is a big complaint from a lot of people, and something that I didn't realize literally until yesterday morning. How I didn't have empathy for this, but Luke's role in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So we have not seen Luke for 30 some odd years. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Is it 30 years between?
Yeah. 30-ish years. Yeah.
So a lot of people say that's not what Luke would do. That's not the Luke that we saw grow. This is a different character. My take has always been like, yes, absolutely. Are you the same person you were 30 days ago, let alone 30 years ago? And so that I never understood. I loved Luke's journey in this. Yesterday, let me tell you, I guess mild spoiler if anyone's still watching the Crisis event, the CWDC Crisis event. Tom Welling comes back as Smallville. I invested 10 years into that damn Smallville. Lex Luthor shows up. He's got kryptonite. He's like, "You're done, man." He's like, "Oh, I took gold kryptonite. I haven't had superpowers for years." And I was livid. Yeah. And I was like, hey, I waited 10 years. He CGI'd the suit on him in my head, and in the comics, he got to be Superman. And now you're telling me all that was for nothing?
Oh, right, because Smallville is a big build-up to him becoming
Superman. Right? So now you're telling me after all that, he was Superman for like a month, and then I was like, nah, I'm good. And it was in that moment that I was like, okay, I haven't changed my mind. I still like Luke's thing, but I get it. I get that frustration that I don't even watch these CW shows. I literally just saw the clip of Tom Welling on YouTube. I didn't even watch the whole episode.
Yeah.
So, but I understood. I was like, hey, that's a character I invested a ton of time in. And I guess it just didn't go the way I wanted. I thought, what are your thoughts about the whole Luke thing and fans who felt like that's not the Luke that I deserved?
Yeah, I think I can totally relate to wishing that this was a movie where Luke was in a different place, and in particular the way I process it, because I had that same thing of like, we leave him at a Jedi Master or a Jedi who has, he has fully become a Jedi. Right. Now he's going to become a Master, and how powerful is he going to become, and how wise is he going to become, and how cool is he going to be with that green lightsaber? And yeah, I wish that 10, 15 years ago, there had been a Luke Skywalker movie that was all about him in his absolute prime as a Jedi Master, training students. I wish that they could still go back and make a movie instead of a comic book of the fall of Ben Solo. And I would be happy to see Luke in that kind of prime. For me, I say, well, that's not what this movie is, and I don't think it's what this movie could have been from a couple of different perspectives. One, that Force Awakens sets The Last Jedi up to be Ben's fall was somehow destroyed Luke emotionally, and he went away. So you start from that point, and then you also start from the point of the sequel trilogy, to me, is about the older generation passing the torch to the younger generation. So kind of by definition, this has to be the end of the arc for our older heroes because they have to pass the torch. This is exactly why Lucas decided to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi, so he wasn't just standing there watching Luke do the pilot run on the Death Star, or more importantly, why Obi-Wan wasn't like, Luke, you watch me do the pilot run, because otherwise, what's the point of telling these generational tales where the masters pass something on? Right. So I feel like all that centers Luke at, he has to be at a place of, I'm kind of at the end of my rope, and I have been a wonderful Jedi for a long time, but now I'm in a point of crisis, and structurally in the movie, I kind of need to be able to pass things on, because if he is just the master who can and will wave his hand and knock over all the AT-ATs, there's a part of me that thinks that would be cool, But that, to me, is just an entirely different movie. So there's that kind of dealing with the expectation of Luke as a powerhouse, which I understand. I went into this movie saying I need to see Luke as a powerhouse because I need to see him having true, deep mastery. Because that's what I love about him. And that is one of the reasons that I deeply love his arc, because he does have incredible mastery over the Force. He does this amazing Force projection. So that's that part of it was fulfilled for me. Big picture, in terms of his arc, I have always loved the end of Return of the Jedi. And it made such a huge impact on me. Not to spill my age, but I was old enough that I watched Empire and then had time to think what's going to happen in Return of the Jedi. And my brother and I debated whether or not Luke could kill Darth Vader. Because in our imagination, that was the only possibility. One or the other of them would kill one another. So when I saw Return of the Jedi at young, aged to be influenced, and saw that there was another option of throwing your lightsaber down and using compassion and pacifism and say, I will not make anything better by violence. That to me has been Luke Skywalker in my mind. And that is so what is at the core of everything that's going on with Luke in The Last Jedi, is he has this incredibly razor thin line that the Jedi walk of, we have decided that we will be defenders. We will raise our blade and stop absolute evil from happening. But we want to be absolutely sure that every time we ignite our blade, we don't just start a war and make things worse for having acted. And he's in that exact moment of crisis when he reaches into Ben's mind, his soul, sees he's going to slaughter everyone and everything I love. Is that defense or attack if I strike him down? And for just a second thinks, maybe that's my responsibility. Maybe there's a little bit of even fear of he's going to take Han from me. He's going to take everything from me. And then that second later realizes, no, that's never who I've been. I can't make the mistake here that I almost made with my father.
Right.
And in that moment, that was all. Just that one little moment of weakness was enough from Luke's perspective to send Ben on his journey, to be the sort of final nail in the coffin from Luke's perspective. So that the emotional core of that story just resonates with me so much, of somebody who takes their responsibility, have so much power, and taking it so seriously that he makes a half a second mistake from an understandable perspective of, what if I stop this? No, this is not an okay way to stop this.
Right.
And it just breaks everything around him. And it goes into all of his feelings about the Jedi, of like, well, maybe this idea never worked. Maybe we just always make things worse. And then going to, he's getting inspired by Rey. He's being reminded that, yeah, you owe Leia hope. You owe me hope. You owe the galaxy hope. And he's reconnecting with the Force, and he's starting to feel that. And he's worried about Kylo. He's worried about Rey. And, by the time Yoda appears, I think he wants to help. But as he says to Yoda, like, I can't be what she wants me to be. I want the galaxy to know the true me, the fallible me who makes mistakes, not the legend. And then when Yoda reminds him, like, everybody makes mistakes. That's part of your journey. That's part of what you need to pass on to her. It's like that final push he needs to say, all right, I do need to act. It is a Jedi's responsibility, if they have the power, to do something. What can I do that won't betray who I want to be, which is to believe that violence is not going to make things better. Me committing violence, especially against my nephew, will not make things better. For him to have the creativity and the mastery to say, I need to be the hope one last time. I need to save my sister. I need to be an inspiration. It's okay that it's okay that I am honest with myself about who I am. And it's okay if the galaxy needs to see me as that hero standing alone against the entire First Order with just my lightsaber, and finds a way to do it. That to me is just so beautiful.
I think it's also, J.J. Abrams spoke today in that interview where he said, episode 8 is maybe a little meta. And I definitely see how Luke in this movie, the legend of Luke Skywalker isn't just in this galaxy far, far away. It's in our it's in our world, this legend of Luke. And I think people forget, or sometimes, when you think about the journey of Luke, it's like, he's been tempted by the dark side before. I mean, he didn't cut off his dad's hand in a jolly fashion. That was that was anger. I think I see the dark side of the Force as like alcoholism, where it's not like you defeat it once and you never get tempted or feel it again.
It's a constant challenge.
Right. And I think to say that like this Luke isn't a Luke that I understand, or a Luke that this isn't the same character, it's like, well, to me it is, because the fact that he let his mind go to a dark place is not the first time, and it's not the first time that he's immediately pulled himself back. And I think you're right. I think just realistically, it's like, well, I want to see Han, Leia, and Luke on another adventure. It's like, but they're older people. Like we tried this with Indiana Jones and you hated it. Like I don't think that the legend could have ever lived up in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of different conversations to say, I wish they had made a series of movies where the big three, the older generation, were like the main characters in the first movie. And we kind of met the sequel kids, but it wasn't their movie until the second or third movie. It's fine to say, hey, I want that. But I don't think that's the same as criticizing the movie that was actually made.
100%.
And in terms of the meta thing, I think the whole sequel trilogy is meta. I think when Han Solo says, Chewie, we're home, he was talking to the viewing audience
right.
as much as he was Chewie. And Abrams himself has said in interviews, the thing that finally hooked me is when somebody told me the idea of Luke Skywalker is a myth in universe. And that he was like, that's my way in. I can relate to a young person who is trying to live up to their heroes. For me, casting himself as Rey, right. And Luke as George Lucas, basically. So if it is meta, I think that's a fine observation, but I think that's true of the entire sequel trilogy.
100% agree with you. I think the other thing people say about Luke is, do you feel like the character that we left at the end of Return of the Jedi would even allow the First Order to get as far as it did? Would he have somehow at least helped in another way, even if it's not mowing down the First Order with his lightsaber? Or is this so traumatic for him that the galaxy as a whole just doesn't matter to him at the moment?
Yeah, I don't think it's that the galaxy as a whole doesn't matter to him. I think it is that real conviction of, hey, when I was a kid, I was a warrior, and I thought that's what a Jedi was supposed to be, is a warrior. And then I found out that that's the way my dad looked at it. He got involved in a war. He fell. I was in a war. I almost fell. Mm-hmm. And that's really not what the Jedi are. I think that's what his speech to Rey about the nature of the Force, when she sees the visions of the cycle of life and death, that
right.
The balance in the light and dark is natural. And that's why the Jedi want to ultimately, if possible, be passive. They just want to sit and let the galaxy naturally turn. And it's only when powerful dark side Force users start to corrupt everything that they're like, okay, that's the one thing we can't tolerate because you will destroy everything. But I think that's what makes the character compelling, is he is trapped in that question. And even if Ben wouldn't have fallen, I think he would have really said, like, Yoda and Obi-Wan learned that they made a big mistake by going into the Clone Wars because they just accelerated the darkness from all that violence and death, and then they couldn't sense the Force properly and didn't know that they were being consumed from within.
Right.
So I think he'd be really careful about, like, do I really want to train a bunch of Jedis to not be peacekeepers, but warriors?
Right.
But then you get into that fundamental thing that I think Last Jedi does reaffirm, is like, yes, if you have power and something evil is happening, yeah, you should act.
Yeah.
But try to find a way to do it in a way that's going to do the least harm.
Hopefully with milk involved.
Lots of yummy green milk.
So to me, that feels very clear. Here's a character that a lot of people feel like maybe their storyline wasn't as clear, or kind of just wafered on for the whole time. We're talking about Finn and Rose. I mean, if you really want to zero it down to the Canto Bight sequence, this was one where I kind of feel like the first time I saw the movie, I will admit that's the part where I was like, okay, where are we going with this? And then I remember in my head, because I had tickets for the next day, and I was like, okay, I know that there's about a 40-minute stretch here that I'm not interested in, because I just stretched it out in my mind. That was so long.
Right.
When I saw it the second time, I was like, oh, I guess it's not that long. You know what I mean? Like, there's like, oh, I can't, I love everything, but I can't wait for the Blu-ray so I can skip that scene. And now there's still, I don't like the horse things.
The father years?
I just don't.
Yeah. Just like from a design perspective?
From a design perspective, I think it's one of the few things. I think the movie looks aesthetically like so beautiful. Like there's so many shots that just look like just screen cap it and put it on my wall in a frame.
Right.
And that one to me just feels like, 2010, Jumanji CGI.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look good to me, but ultimately I've come around on it. I don't love it. I don't hate it. But a lot of people, this is like one of their first quote unquote weapons against this movie. It's like that Canto bite scene.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts kind of on the whole Canto bite and really just like what Finn and Rose and their role in all of this?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that for me, for my personal taste, the Canto bite scenes on the surface are my least favorite. Mm-hmm. I feel like Star Wars movies are always a balancing act between the adventure serial, hey, it was all based on cliffhangers, from the 30s and 40s and 50s, and you got to keep the adventure coming. And it's, hero's journey, deep philosophy, and you always kind of have to balance those. And I feel like the father chase was like really needed action sequence to get that side of Star Wars balanced out.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a great action sequence. That, not a ton happens, and the CGI, a lot of people are like, yay, is Harry Potter riding a wand? Like, yeah, and I totally get that. I think it is, every beat of it is essential to the arc of what the movie is trying to say, and both Finn and Rose's journey. Finn, in particular, is wrestling with, his whole journey in the movie is, I'm not all in on the Resistance yet. The only thing I've ever wanted to do is go away from the First Order. Then I met Rey. Now I just want to keep Rey safe. He's doing all of this, and he says it explicitly, to keep Rey safe.
Right.
Rose has this view of Finn that mirrors all of the legend stuff that's going on with Luke, as she is kind of seeing him as this hero. And he didn't even know that was possible.
Right.
Like Luke's, in a cave meditating about it and brooding over it. And Finn's like, oh, I could be a legend? What's that all about? And she's gone through this trauma. So he is being sort of affected by her. They meet DJ, who is this classic sort of person that you would meet in the real world, too. The kind of person who derails any conversation about anything while just saying, like, they're both just as bad. Like, you could say that about politics. You could have two friends going, we should go to this pizza place, this taco place. And then this person who comes in and goes, they're both bad. So why don't we just sit back and think about how I'm the most right? I'm like, cool, doesn't do anything for us. But he's making a compelling point about that both sides have spent money on various equipment and buying arms and on all that kind of stuff. So I think there's these critical points of their journeys that are happening on Canto Bight. Perhaps most critical is the meeting of the stable kids.
Right.
And seeing this kind of classic, Star Wars really is always protecting the underdog, particularly any sort of orphans, any sort of sense of found family. And the movie's also really concerned with this idea of hope. So for them to encounter these kids, for Finn to kind of see this place on the surface is like, ooh, it's a fancy, rich place. And then Rose to really have this perspective of like, yeah, great, these are rich people who don't care, but the First Order is destroying defenseless people. And I came from a planet like that. These kids are going to be victims of the First Order. It's all really important for Finn getting to see DJ's wrong, and they're not both the same. The First Order and the Resistance have very, very different goals. They're not just two, machines in a cycle who are going to do the exact same thing.
Right.
So I think just like thematically, I could ramble on and on about all the different connections and themes because I really do think it's all layered in. So I think every beat is important to telling the story. Perhaps most important, the meeting of DJ to get that other perspective on Finn, and the meeting of the stable kids to show us people in the galaxy who are in dire, horrible circumstances who do need hope. They do need a legend.
DJ was a character that I think I struggled with the most because when I walked out, I was like, why are you here? And then I was just like, where do I want him back? Do I need more? I think honestly, I think it's just one of those things where it's like DJ is one of those characters that throws in this kind of like this idea of like war profiteering, and then he's out. And I guess I was just like, am I just not smart enough to realize like, why is Benicio in this movie, and then why is he peace out, and then that's it, that's over. As far as I know, he's probably not in Rise of Skywalker. Like that was it. That was DJ.
No. And I think I don't super love him as a character like most Star Wars characters, like tiny random pod racers. I'd be like, yeah, I'll watch that Disney Plus show about Team Topaglius. But I'm not super jazzed about DJ as a character, and I think that's can be a valid criticism, but I think he is a load-bearing structure in terms of the ideas of the movie. And in terms of playing with Star Wars and making you kind of question it back and forth, he's a scoundrel who is kind of a scoundrel. He's not Han or Lando. The movie plays with that like, oh, is he going to turn around and be a good guy? Like, no, he is a guy who is actually what Han claims to be, a guy who is just out for himself.
Right.
And to see that run up against like, yeah, he's not going to turn around and save you. In fact, your dealings with him got many people in the Resistance just killed, and is the final push for Finn to see, oh, Rose is the face of the Resistance. They're not just some random idea. It's not like First Order is Team Red and this is Team Blue, and they're both kind of the same.
Right. When
he is down on his knees being betrayed by DJ and people are going to die, that is what truly gets Finn to see, like, I want to be a part of the Resistance. I believe in the Resistance. So I think DJ really exists to play with the scoundrel idea and to push Finn where he ultimately goes.
I mean, you said at the top about subverting expectations. That was the one where when he like double turned again, I was like, I don't know what's happening in this movie, but kind of in a good way. I mean, it was moments like that really, like, by the time we get Finn's kind of last stand on Crate, I was like, oh, he might actually die. This movie at this point.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I was like,
and that was such a nice feeling.
Right.
I mean, I love Finn. I love John Boyega, but that was a nice feeling as a moviegoer to go, holy crap, I believe they're going to kill one of the main characters. You don't get to feel that in blockbusters.
And I kind of give that to DJ, because I was like, okay, now I see where, you know, this whole story beat's going. And then when it flipped on its head, he's like, maybe. And then peace out. I was like, oh, anything goes right now.
The maybe is one of his best lines, because I believe that he actually does like them. But that's just truly who he is. We haven't really seen that character in Star Wars. We've seen, like, you know, bounty hunters who are badasses, and we've seen straight up evil people, and we've seen scoundrels with a heart of gold, and he's just like, oh no, I really like you, and if we hadn't got caught, I absolutely would have done the job. I'm just doing this because I really mean me first, and that is my entire life view.
DJ is actually a character I would watch a Disney Plus show, to be honest.
I'm talking myself into it, yeah.
Okay, so while that is happening in kind of the hangar bay, let's go upstairs, I guess, to the throne room. And this is one where I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. Snoke.
Okay.
Snoke was something that was kind of shrouded in mystery. In fact, you know, when you think about it, really, Snoke is the first voice of anyone that we ever hear in this new trilogy in that very first teaser.
That Thanksgiving teaser,
yeah,
right?
It was all Snoke, and it's who is Snoke? Who could he be? What's his backstory? Who is this guy? Is he really 10,000 feet tall, or is it just a hologram?
Yeah, it's a really vain hologram, yeah.
Why a bathrobe? I still don't know. Is it Goldmember? Maybe. But then, again, another twist on, you know, if Star Wars is a poem, it rhymes.
Yeah.
This is breaking the rhythm completely, and what we think is kind of a mirror of some of that duel from Return of the Jedi. It's over. There goes Snoke. He's gone. He's out. A lot of people say, what a waste. That is, you know, I've seen so many people that are like, well, that's just Rian Johnson just poo-pooing on J.J. Abrams saying, it doesn't matter. Does Snoke matter?
I think that is totally subjective. All things are, so that's a daring statement on my part.
Hot Takes with Billy Biz.
Art is subjective. Hot take. I mean, I think art is subjective. No, I guess what I am of two minds for myself.
Okay.
I'm the Star Wars fan who's like, hey, they'll if that's it for Snoke in the movies, there'll be books, there'll be comics. I'm intrigued by the character, and they'll flesh it out. I don't need more of him in the movies. I also understand people who are like, I want to see Star Wars just the movies. I'm not going to read every book.
Sure.
And I want something delivered. I feel like without seeing the third film, I don't have a final opinion on how he lands. Because there's a part of me where I don't feel like he was set up as a mystery in The Force Awakens. My opinion is that we decided he was a mystery. He was just a character that we didn't get much information about. And again, this might be a bias of having lived through the original trilogy. And the Emperor popped up in Empire Strikes Back, and I understood him to be the bad guy who is Darth Vader's boss and is probably even meaner, and the good guys are even more afraid of him. And I did not spend 3 years going, where was he born? How does he tie to this character? And I think I carried that to this, where it's like, oh, he's another dark side user. He comes from somewhere in the unknown regions, which I had kind of speculated, and then they kind of played that out in the books and in the comics. He gives some commands to Kylo Ren. He serves a role as being another parental figure that Kylo Ren struggles to live up to in Force Awakens. But to me, no mystery is dangled. So then I just get to his role in The Last Jedi, which I love. I love that these movies keep a little bit tied to their roots of being pulp and being those early adventure serials where people say phrases like raw power and say it like that. Like, it's one of the reasons I love Palpatine is you can dive into his meaning as a political allegory and what does he mean as the face of evil. He's also a scenery-chewing, absurd, dark space wizard. And I like that in Snoke, too. I like the story that he pushes Kylo's buttons on purpose. Kylo is struggling to own his own identity. He wants to believe that he is as powerful and as evil as Darth Vader. He wants to recast himself as a monster, and to see Snoke just poke at that and go, nah, I'm going to take your identity away from you too. Your dad just told you you're not really who you think you are, and I'm going to tell you that to you too, just to manipulate you and screw with you. And more than anything, I love that he is a picture of fear. Like, that's so been the story of the dark side in Star Wars for a long time, and Lucas really doubled down on it in the prequels of everything starts from fear. And these first two movies, plot-wise, are motivated by Snoke just being afraid of how awesome Luke Skywalker is.
Right.
Like, he could just go about his business and be conquering the galaxy, and he is spending so much energy on this fear that Luke will survive, that Hope will survive. And I like that picture of a villain, because if you look at Star Wars as a morality tale, I think that's a great thing to say is even people who are extremely powerful and they're power hungry, their weakness is that it's all coming from a place of fear and insecurity. So to see him be incredibly powerful, be able to manipulate Kylo, connect Kylo and Rey's minds, throw Rey around like a rag doll, just take the information from her mind. There's nothing she can do to stop him. He's a powerhouse, but then it is his vanity that allows Kylo to take him out in what is, for me, like one of the coolest scenes that I've ever seen in a Star Wars movie, because it was a surprise.
Yes, it definitely was a surprise. And I'll tell you why I really liked that, and why I'm with you. I actually never saw Snoke as like, oh, I gotta unwrap this mystery. Is like, no, I get it. You're the new emperor, essentially.
Yeah.
And the reason why I really liked Snoke in The Last Jedi and what happens with him was I understood, or at least the way I thought of it was like, when he kills Snoke, I was like, wow, in 2 movies, not 3, he was able to do what Darth Vader could never do, which was kill the boss who you don't actually really like.
Yeah.
And actually get to, supersede his position.
Yeah.
Like, Anakin kills the Emperor, but kills himself while doing it.
It's a selfless act. It's not trying to take over.
Right.
That's the way of the Sith, right? You try to kill your master, and Vader never pulled it off.
But the fact that Kylo Ren was like, oh, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like, he's already in my mind now, like, yeah, you were worried about living up to Darth Vader. Dude, you just exceeded him. You did what he could not do.
Well, and he did in Force Awakens too, because Vader, when faced with the challenge of killing someone he truly loves in Luke, Vader couldn't do it. And I think that's part of what is going on in Force Awakens. If Kylo wants to prove, I'm going to do something my grandfather couldn't.
Right.
I'm going to kill someone I'd love, a family member.
So it makes, to me, Snoke, and I think this is kind of his role, strengthens Kylo Ren's character so much. Because now I'm like, if this isn't enough, like, you've done everything, like, what more, like, are you going to need before you feel secure in your dark sideness? Or what will satiate you? Because it seems like even killing this boss that just was bullying him.
Yeah.
Killing his dad to push down the light side, it's still not enough. He leaves Last Jedi, and you just get this feeling like he's still searching for something. He doesn't feel secure in his position.
Yeah, and I think Kylo is an endlessly fascinating character, which is also part of the reason, like, that's fine to cut down Snoke because he's a interesting villain. I like watching him. I love his performance. I love his robe. But Kylo is so intriguing to me, of this character who could never live up to the pressure of his family, and feels like they're afraid of him. They're treat him with kid gloves. They ship him off because they want to be able to control his powers. He's not sure what his uncle thinks of him. Somewhere along the line, Snoke gets in his ear, in his soul. So then he transfers, we learn in the novel Bloodline that they hadn't told him about Vader. So this kind of rebellious kid who's already insecure goes, I'll shift all of my allegiance over to these new parental figures of my dead grandfather in this guy who's manipulating me and teaching me the dark side. And in Last Jedi, he's just getting so like, no, I want my identity to be my identity. I want to forge it myself. I'm trying to kill Luke. Killed my father. I almost brought myself to shoot down my mother. Side note on that. And I'll smash the mask, and I'll smash Vader for now, if that's what you're gonna say, if that's all I am to you, and I'll kill you too. And I'm me. I'm a monster.
Right.
I don't know what that is, and I'm not fulfilled by it, but I got it.
I mean,
that's a fascinating place to leave him, where he's like, I kind of got what I wanted.
Right. But
what Luke says to him of, if you strike me down in anger, I'll be with you always, just like your father. I think that's what he's wrestling with, of like, I'm getting rid of all of them. I'm getting rid of all these people that I can't live up to or tell me who I am or who I'm not. And I have nothing because I'm just boiling with anger and confusion.
Well, that's why, and you've said this before on ForceCenter, so I'll try not to completely rip you off. It's great, and if I knew the episode, I'd point people to it right now. But I love that the mask is coming back in Rise of Skywalker. Sure, you could be cynical and say, well, because they want to sell more toys. Probably. You're probably not wrong. But the thing that I love is, it's like, yeah, what an ultimate sign of rebellion. It's like, if someone tells you every day, take off that stupid thing, everyone tells take it off. Poe tells him to take it off. Rey tells him to take it off. Snoke tells him to take it off. He crushes it in anger. He's like, no, I'm in charge. And guess what? This thing that you thought is stupid, this stupid thing, me, I just took out everybody. I'm putting it back on. I love the cracks in it. I can't wait for Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a very weird analogy, but it's like if somebody went around pretending to smoke candy cigarettes because they wanted to be a badass and everybody made fun of them. And they're like, now I smoke lots of real cigarettes and I have terrible lung cancer. I told you this is who I was. Because, like, that's a very weird analogy. But you know what I mean is he has the scars now.
Right.
Because to me, that's what works so well in The Force Awakens, is that Vader wears that for a reason. Not just to scare people. And he's handsome. And he has those flowing locks and he's not scarred. Well, now he is. Literally in his face. Literally in his soul. The mask itself. And, like, now he's not a poser. When he puts that helmet back on, now he has earned what he wanted that mask to mean. And it still leaves that question of, cool, what do you have but anger and a desire to control?
Right.
You know?
So let's talk about moving on here. I want to shift gears a little bit. So we've been talking a lot about what's been going on, Resistance and First Order and their war. But one of the big subplots of this movie was a little infighting within the Resistance themselves. And this is Poe's storyline. A lot of people who... this one... Sure, I could see it, but also I didn't agree with this one in particular. But a lot of people, why didn't she just tell Poe what the plan is? You could have avoided a lot of unnecessary mutiny, I suppose.
Yeah. I think the big picture is she does tell him and everyone the plan explicitly in her speech when she gets introduced as the interim leader while Leia is recovering, and says, important thematic things to the movie of everywhere around the galaxy, wherever oppressed people are, for example, stable kids on Canto Bight, they know our symbol and it gives them hope. We need to survive. That is our mission right now, to survive. She literally just kind of says it straight out. And then their conversation right away where she says, weren't you demoted for doing an incredibly risky thing and going on the offensive? And I think this also, to me, it goes a little bit with the whole Jedi of, when do you attack, when do you defend? And Poe is in that, like, I'm young, I'm dashing, I'm headstrong. I see myself more as a pilot than a leader, even though Leia keeps telling me to kind of be a leader if you read the Poe Dameron comic books. And I think Holdo understands, she calls him a flyboy, and I think Holdo understandably thinks, like, you just defied Leia, who you have a good relationship with, to do a risky attack that got a ton of people killed. I just told you our only objective right now is to survive. I am nervous about giving you this information because I am afraid you're going to do something dangerous with it.
Right.
So I think from Holdo's perspective, it makes perfect sense. I understand how, as an audience member, it's got a little bit of this almost like Shakespearean tragedy, like almost like Romeo and Juliet of like,
right.
Just get some phones and text one another and find out what's going on. I understand that it is frustrating, but I think it's a huge part of challenging Poe's character. And the part of it that gets really beautiful to me and I think reaffirms Star Wars is it starts to feel like a critique of doing a strange, daring, brave mission. It starts to feel like we're critiquing the moment in A New Hope where Han screams and chases the stormtroopers and then realizes he's in a room full of them. And
right.
It feels like, are we critiquing that? And I think what it's ultimately saying is there is absolutely a time for that, but a leader chooses when is the moment to retreat and make survival the priority, make defense a priority, and when is the moment that you should do something incredibly risky and daring. And so much what Poe is getting angry about is I think he sees the resistance as we're the brave ones who come flying in and make a difference and fight. And he can't see the resistance as something that also has to be an inspiration and live to fight another day. In that scene where he gets so mad and is knocking things over, is this is what you've brought us to, of just giving up, running and hiding. Is flipped on its head when Holdo is not a coward. She picks a moment to do a big, daring, crazy thing that gets herself killed because those things aren't bad. There's just a time for them.
Right.
And that to me is it reaffirms that, yeah, there's a moment to take daring risks.
I also think just on a practical level with this one, it's just you understanding storytelling. I remember when Avengers Infinity War came out and people were so mad at Star-Lord for punching Thanos in the face, and even Chris Pratt got on Twitter and was like, yeah, I'm disappointed in him too. I'm like, but then the movie's over. I think
yes.
I think if nothing happens and he's like, all right, I'm just going to go with this and let's see what happens. Like that is a very boring movie.
Exactly. I think there's a fine line between being frustrated because a character does a dumb thing versus movies just being didactic of like, here is how to do things correctly. Like that movies are not like a, how to make an Orange Julius video, like here are the steps. Don't punch Thanos when they're trying to put the glove on him. That will not make a good Orange Julius. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think with Poe stuff, it's relatable. And again, as you said at the top, it's fine if people are like, I recognize all these things and I still just don't personally like it. I don't enjoy it. I want Star Wars to be a little bit more about adventure and camaraderie. And I don't like the deep dive into the little bit more of the, philosophy or really hard choices. Totally understand that. But I think the goal of the movie is also to really delve into that very George Lucas theme of looking at things from different point of views. And I think all of the characters have their point of view challenged. And that's totally what the Holdo and Poe thing is about, is Poe having his viewpoint challenged and coming to that point of realizing, because I did pull this mutiny, I ended up doing exactly what she was trying to prevent me from doing. I took a risk that I shouldn't, and it got a lot of people killed because it wasn't the time to make that to take that risk.
Right. Another sequence happens during all of this, or at least prior to this, I should say, which is the Mary Poppins Leia moment, as the internet has labeled it. I have to say, of all the things that people have to say about Last Jedi or the criticisms, this was the one that genuinely surprised me, because at least the theater I was in opening night, everyone was moved and was clapping and jubilant at this moment. So I was kind of shell-shocked when I found out later that this was like people were saying this was a parody or like a almost a humorous moment. I guess I just never saw it that way. I was like, of course they've told us in like Empire and Jedi, like she has Force powers.
Yeah.
She just chose not to be a Jedi. She chose to fight a different fight.
Yeah. And to me, I love it. I did a whole episode of the Star Wars counseling show that I do. I haven't been doing it as much because it's time consuming.
As I can see, I've basically just been like, Joseph, solve all these problems for me right now.
Oh no, it's my point of view. I think you have to start from the place, if you want to enjoy it. Start from the place of, isn't it cool that Leia finally gets to use her Force powers? I mean, you go back to Return of the Jedi, and it's such a big revelation. You have that power too,
right?
And it's layered into the books if you want it, where every time that she uses the Force, it's intuitive. She's aware that it's there. Even when we see her use it in the original trilogy, it's always about being connected. Sensing that Luke is in trouble. I don't think Luke on Bespin could have just called to Chewie.
Right.
That's her Force power, is to be intuitive. So I love that it's not that she's like, well, we're in trouble, so I will, throw some rocks or I'll knock these stormtroopers over. It's so Leia. She is so dedicated to the mission and saying, this is hard. It's not fun. It has to be done. She knows that she hasn't trained fully anyone to take over, and the Resistance isn't safe. And she's not done. And that's the way it hit me emotionally when I saw it in the theater. Of she's floating there in space through this horrible trauma, just sensed her son. You can debate whether she senses it's coming. And the fact that she just reaches out with her hand. It is so much about, no, I'm not done. I need to go back to my mission. And just that her hand is reaching out to go back to where she needs to be is so Leia. And it is such an intuitive use of the Force. I don't know how you feel about Mandalorian spoilers on this podcast.
Go for it. You know what? Mandalorian spoiler. There it is. I spoiled the Crisis event, so if you're already if you're still with me, then you're not mad.
Total spoilers. It'll be 30 seconds. When Baby Yoda reaches out to stop the Mudhorn, like that, I like the Force being an intuitive thing.
Right.
Baby Yoda doesn't know, I have Force hold, and I will use that ability.
Right, it's not Battlefront.
He just senses this guy is gonna die. That thing's gonna crush him, and just reaches out because it's the right thing to do in that moment. Done with the spoilers. So I love that it is Leia reaching out. I love her theme, and then I think it comes down to a taste thing and a perception thing of how you think it looks.
Yeah.
I am not super picky myself about CGI. I think, there's something about the Father Years writing that doesn't look that great to me.
Sure.
I couldn't put my finger on it. Leia floating through space, I feel like it looks like a middle-aged woman doing flying. And I mean, I think that's just, I think to me, this is my bias. There's a part of it that we don't see older people, older women doing sort of action things. And if we do, they are chiseled warrior people who we have known for years. Right. They're like Ming-Na Wen, they're like people who are like,
Sarah Connor.
I'm a trained, and we haven't seen just sort of like day-to-day people, a middle-aged woman in a regal dress doing an action thing.
Right.
And I think that disconnect sometimes takes people out of it because it looks different because it's not the kind of person that we get to see do that.
Right.
But that to me only makes it more cool.
I remember
That's who she is.
I remember being very surprised at the moment too, because she gets blown out of the ship, and I was like, okay, the unfortunate passing of Carrie Fisher. I was like, all right, that was it. And then they cut back, and I was like, all right, it's a little gratuitous if she's dead, and we're just gonna sit here on it. I was like, this is not the closure I wanted. So when she flew back, I was like, oh, like they had an out, and that's not the story. They chose not to take it.
Yeah, and I think it had been in the movie forever. It was not put in because she had passed.
Right. Yeah.
It was in there because this is the Skywalker saga. She is a Skywalker. She is powerful with the Force, and it would be fun and interesting to see that. And it serves a bunch of functions thematically and narratively. It puts her out of commission. So Poe and Holdo, Poe can try to rise to the challenge and fail so he can learn.
Yeah. Wouldn't you love, by the way, just like a what if Leia had been the one sent to Tatooine and Luke was on Alderaan and Leia was the powerful Jedi? I just always thought, like, man, if Leia had trained, I bet she would have just been unstoppable.
There's a great there's that book From a Certain Point of View, which is A New Hope from lots of different points of view, and there's a great section with Yoda talking about exactly that kind of thing. So if people are interested in that, I'd say go check out that chapter.
So we'll never know what a super powerful Leia Jedi would have been, but boy, did we found out what a super powerful Rey Jedi she could be. A lot of people, and I don't think this is exclusive to Last Jedi. I think this was brought up in Force Awakens. Like, Rey is so powerful. Things that Luke took. How long was Luke on Dagobah? I never really know when I watch Empire how long this is.
It's a little bit open for a debate. They kind of don't lock that kind of thing down in solid canon, but
let's call it a galactic standard Dagobah month, whatever that means to you.
47 hours, yeah.
But I do think Rey never quite has the formal training. And yet she is so powerful with the Force and doing things well beyond just, I don't think Broom Kid at the end is going to be doing some of the Jedi mind tricks. And here's Rey, who's never been taught. I always imagine, and maybe this is my headcanon and it's just not true, but I bought it, was when she searched Kylo's mind in Force Awakens, I feel like it kind of like imprinted some stuff on her where she's like, oh, I can do this, I can do that because I saw it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things. I think, she's supposed to be powerful. It's called The Force Awakens. When she pilots the Falcon, which she says, I've flown before. Mm-hmm. She's like, but never anything like that. I don't know what happened. And then we cut immediately to the scene of Snoke saying there has been an awakening.
Right.
I don't know off the top of my head if we cut immediately, but that is the awakening. Rey doesn't do anything else that could possibly be the awakening. So that is a moment that something is truly awakening in her. And Abrams has even kind of hinted at, interesting that happened, huh? Yeah. He said in a recent interview. So if you think she's overpowered, I'd also say, just stop and consider that's a part of the story.
Right.
And, maybe the third film doesn't bear it out in a satisfying way, but if you think she's a little overpowered, that might be part of the point of literally calling it The Force Awakens. Everything Snoke says about, evil rises and light to meet it. Skywalker, I assumed, but no, I guess it's this girl.
Yeah.
And then just actually breaking down what she does, like what you're saying, like, she had her mind invaded by Kylo Ren, fights back. She appears to know lots of Jedi stories and myths. So to me, it's never been that surprising of like, okay, well, I know what it feels like to go into somebody else's mind. And I've heard Jedi could do that, could reach into somebody's mind and make them do things.
Right.
So I'll try that.
Yeah, it's funny because, they're like, well, she could lift 40, 50 boulders, and Luke could barely, lift a couple pebbles in R2-D2. It's like, well, also I think that's part of Luke's journey in Empire Strikes Back is, what am I doing here? Is all of this crazy? And I don't think Rey ever kind of questions what she's doing. It's just what she's doing. How does that fit in with everything else?
Yeah, I think they're entirely different kind of journeys. Luke wants to be a powerful Jedi like his father and gets kind of off the track in thinking that a Jedi is a warrior. And then he encounters Yoda and he's like, and Yoda's basically like, don't really want to train you. Not really cut out for this, and everything you think is wrong. But I'll try, buddy. And they develop a bond, obviously. So I think he is coming from that place where, as Yoda says to him, he has to unlearn what he has learned. Whereas Rey, this is just kind of all new to her.
Right.
And like with the rocks, I was just rewatching that scene that the lifting the rocks come right after Luke says, and I will not be the last Jedi. And it's, again, it's to me this sense of intuitive, it's not an assignment, that you're going to pass or fail with your master to lose rocks. It's behind there is my friend Finn, and I can save him or not. And I reach out and I save him. And it's that intent.
Right.
Not the I'm going to calculate how heavy rocks they are and have a rock lifting competition with another Jedi. To me, it's so much more spiritual. It's about the relationship between the characters, and it's about the intent of I raise my hand to save my friend. And the thing that happens when I do that is these rocks fly in the air because that's what I'm willing.
Another thing that happens on Octo,
I think.
Octo, yeah. I've never heard of.
Yeah, I think I go back and forth.
Yeah.
In the Star Wars tradition.
Who knows until someone says you've been saying it wrong your whole life. You know what? At least 3 months before Phantom Menace came out, I had it in my mind that it was Qui-Gon, and it was so hard to undo that in my brain for so long. But Rey goes down into that cave, and we're finally going to find out who Rey's parents are, and it's kind of a weird mystery. It feels similar to, but very different from The Empire Strikes Back, Luke facing off against Vader and seeing himself. And then we find out your parents were nobody, and that really upset a lot of people. I think at the time I was like, oh, that's okay. But then, when you step away from I thought it was going to be this, it should have been this, it could have been that. And when you think about it wouldn't have made sense for the overall, that ending pre-credits, post-credit scene of the kid grabbing the broom, that doesn't make sense if Rey is a Skenobi walker,
Yeah. And people have a lot of different opinions about how Last Jedi is like a real reclaiming of the forces for everyone. And I feel like I can see that. But it's also to me, it's Star Wars canon. All those prequel Jedi you met were not chosen ones. And They don't come from a long line of Agent Kohlers.
Yeah.
It's just, he was born, he had the Force. There's Kenobi's grandfather is not a famous Jedi. He was born on Stujon. He had the Force. Tamiri Blag, the broom kid, was born somewhere, ended up on Cantonica. He has the Force. There's something special about Rey. She is more powerful. She does seem to be destined and interconnected in the same way that the Skywalkers were, Anakin and Luke.
Right.
And that's why this focus is happening. That's maybe why she is more powerful. But in terms of her being a no one, my mind goes a couple places. I think Rian Johnson made a film to be provocative, to challenge and go, hey, what if it was this? And again, in my opinion, ultimately to reaffirm. So there's these things that feel like they are a response to our 2 years of fan conversation, and they weren't a response to anything but the Force Awakens script, right? So I think that there is especially when people first saw the film, a sense that they were talked to, of with the way Luke really throws the lightsaber over his shoulder, and they're like, your parents were no one, and Snoke is dead. It can feel like the film is talking to fans, but it wasn't. We debated for 2 years, and that's ForceCenter has the Speculate Responsibly t-shirts,
right?
And that's the thing of just realize it's fun to speculate about Star Wars, but the artists aren't reading our tweets. They're not reading or listening to all of our podcasts. They can't know ahead of time what we're going to build into mysteries or fan theories,
right?
So I think that's just a good starting point of, it's not a response to us. It's not trying to kick the legs out from under us. We had fun speculating for 2 years, and this was the answer that the artist thought was important.
Which, look, I know nothing about Rise of Skywalker other than the 2 trailers. I've seen no TV spots. Full disclosure, I don't know when you are listening to this, listener, but this has not come out yet. Should they, I don't even want to say retcon, because I think retcon's a wrong word. Should they expand upon this and it turns out nobody is from a certain point of view and it is quite actually somebody and instead of nobody, does that taint kind of this movie for you, or does that kind of feel like, that could happen? If that does happen, will you feel like kind of cheated a little bit or not so much?
It depends on exactly how it's handled, because I think there's a lot of elegance to what's in The Last Jedi, and nothing is as definitive as it might seem or feel. And it is all, to me, about whatever happens in a movie is, hey, is it thrilling for the audience? Yes, but what's ultimately meaningful is what does it mean to the characters?
Right.
And Rey is a character who I think has the sort of opposite but complementary trauma to Ben Solo, where Ben feels sort of overshadowed by all of these various mentor figures, and she has no one. But they're both sort of like connected in that sort of fear of this trauma about mentors. So what Rey wants more than anything is to know where she comes from and to be given identity and to take some of this sudden responsibility taken off of her shoulders. So she goes to that dark side cave, and that dark side cave is trying to break her by telling her in the kind of the cruelest way, whispering, come here, we'll tell you the truth. You got nothing. Your worst fear is confirmed.
Yeah.
So I really like the cave sequence from that perspective of you have nothing. And that's the worst thing that you could hear is it's only on you to be who you are going to be.
Right.
So I love that because that's a big part of her journey. And then Kylo uses that to kind of try to not break her, but get her on his side.
Right.
And most importantly to me, I love, of all Star Wars themes, I think maybe the from a certain point of view is my favorite. That Kylo and Rey connect, and they both see things that are absolutely true. I think that Rey sees Kylo turning on Snoke and assumes from her point of view that means he is going to side with the resistance and come back to the light.
Right.
And I think Kylo sees the truth that Rey's parents just left her and she's not a Skywalker or a Kenobi. She doesn't have any lineage, and assumes that means she will break and join him because she so wants to be with someone. So I feel like what they see is so subjective to them. I'm happy with it being very true that Rey was with 2 adults that she believed to be her parents. They dumped her on Jakku because they just didn't want her, and they died, and they're buried on Jakku. And Kylo saw all of that, and all of that is true. Think of how much that leaves open.
Yeah.
If all of that is exactly true, and it turns out, yeah, her parents were absolutely no one, or she's a clone and they were just raising her, or one of them is not anybody we ever knew but force sensitive, and all those different things that it could be. And I think more than anything, my suspicion about Rise of Skywalker, because the story has been so much about dealing with the past generation and what does that make you, I think that we are definitely going to get more about Rey's past. But that's it to me, is it's more. And
not a redo or
yeah, and I feel like Abrams set these characters on this path. He set Rey alone, wanting to go back to Jakku. I mean, she's got the opposite journey of Luke and Anakin, who are like, can't wait to get off Tatooine,
right,
become an awesome Jedi. And she's like, as soon as she gets to leave the galaxy, she's like, this is a very cool place. Please take me home, because all I want is to find myself by knowing my parents.
Yeah.
So I think it's this journey about Rey getting to know herself and trust herself and be who she is for herself.
So you actually mentioned the Force connection. You're making all my transitions very easy for me, by the way. Thank you.
I'm trying
for these lovely segues. A lot of people, and this is why I don't get this at all. If anything, this got me more excited for Last Jedi. Is, well, we've never seen the Force do that. okay, well, before Return of the Jedi, you never saw someone do lightning with their fingertips.
Yeah.
And now that's awesome.
Yeah, that's what a Sith does on Tuesdays. Yeah.
Do you feel that this movie kind of took the concept of the Force and ran with it? I know a lot of people say like Force Skype calls, and
Yeah.
I actually really, it troubled me in the best way, in like that's chilling, that you never know when someone who is your enemy is just right there and they both are just like, I don't have time for you. I don't have time for this. And then coming together in that way. I just thought that was such a great kind of the growing of their relationship in Last Jedi is just so powerful, because you see it doesn't feel forced. Like I see how they start off at odds, and then by the time she's telling him what she saw in that cave, you really like, yeah, this is probably the only person that really understands what she's going through.
Yeah, they've got that natural connection anyway, but I think it is such a relatable thing that you can imagine, like, oh, you're at odds with someone in your life, and you're just suddenly intimately connected with them, and you don't know why.
Yeah.
And you just suddenly have to hash things out from across the galaxy, and you don't
Right,
know why,
yeah.
you know? Imagine you have a coworker you hate, and suddenly you're just brushing your teeth and like, damn, Dan's in the
Hello.
bathroom with me.
He walks out and you're just looking around, you have like toothpaste on your shirt, and you're like, how did this happen?
Yeah. So I think the emotional power and the the narrative growth that we get from that is undeniable. But in terms of the Force powers, I want the Force to be more than we can imagine. I want the Force to be able for different practitioners to use it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So like we've certainly seen people manipulate minds, or in the Clone Wars animated series, there's a part where Anakin kind of crosses a line by invading someone's mind too
Right.
aggressively. But that seems like Snoke's really been like, hey, I've been over here in the unknown regions, watching Palpatine and everything from afar and perfecting my style. And my style is really a lot about mind invasion.
My Shaolin style.
Yeah. He's like, you, Palpatine, you do your drunk monkey or whatever. I'm going to do mind invasion, dark powers, right? Because he's clearly taught that to Kylo. Kylo does the aggressive mind invasion of Rey. That ties together with Snoke being powerful enough to connect their minds. And in terms of like a bigger picture way to imagine the Force, is like certainly you can feel physical objects and you can control the physical world. You can move rocks and you can push people and you can channel the energy in different ways. But since the first movie, we've been introduced to the idea of a Jedi mind trick. And I remember being a kid going like, oh, they can control the physical world and they can move fast. They can see things maybe before they happen. But the mind trick, how does that work? And to me, I think it goes back to that idea of Yoda saying, we're luminous beings. In this idea that the Force can affect you physically, but there is this sort of, we are more than just the sum of our parts. We are this spiritual energy. We are all a part of the Force.
Right.
And that idea, like, I can feel this person in the Force is basically like I can kind of get into their mind. I can get into their soul. And thinking about the Force that way, of just everything we see in Last Jedi is, well, Jedi mind tricks are like Luminous Force 101,
Right.
and these are master classes.
Yeah.
Because there's the advanced sort of mind invasion, there's Snoke connecting minds, and the way I think of Luke's Force projection is just some kind of massive mind trick.
Right.
Which
Which ultimately he kills him.
Yeah, and I mean, I love that idea that anything is possible through the Force, but our little meat bodies
Right.
can
Can't.
only process so much energy through them.
You know what's interesting is, I've been watching all the movies leading up to Rise of Skywalker. I guess I just took for granted the Jedi mind trick is only successfully used once and only attempted one more time in Jabba's palace.
Yeah, and it works on
Actually,
Ben.
I'll say it works twice. And it's tried to use on Jabba, but when you think like Jedi mind trick, it's just become such this thing in pop culture that you would think it's like riddled all over these movies. Like, no, they only use it once in A New Hope, just to get out of a speeding ticket, essentially.
Yeah, to fool TK dumbass. Yeah.
So I too like the idea that there's just more to the Force than any of. I mean, there's a lot of books. There's got to be a lot of tricks in those books.
Yeah, I think if you accept this idea that Lucas has thrown out, there's this cosmic force that is just sort of everything, and then there's the living force that we are kind of all generating by living, by breathing, and being cognizant and all that. There's so much to play with of like, how do those ideas interact? And everything is truly connected the way Yoda described it, what are the limits to what you could do?
Yeah.
And I will say, if you consider the Force projection a massive Jedi mind trick, I do like interpreting it that C-3PO sees Luke because C-3PO has some sort of soul, some sort of actual mind to be manipulated.
He's got to, right? That's the Rise of Skywalker spoiler. C-3PO has a soul.
Yeah.
This last one, this is kind of a small potato, but it is something that I talked about extensively with Ken. I guess this is mild spoiler. We did a Star Wars ranking. Characters gone too soon, and this one definitely popped up on mine. Captain Phasma. She pops up. She has a moment. Then she gets beat down again. And I said it wouldn't bother me so much if Force Awakens, she was a big part of that marketing. It wasn't like I irresponsibly speculated. I was led to believe that Phasma was going to be a big part of that movie.
Yeah.
She was on everything. That chrome was everywhere. And then she wasn't. I was like, oh, okay. Pops back up. Is like, all right, here we go again. And then in this one, look, it feels a little bit like Will Ferrell's character in Austin Powers, where you can't come back again. It's over because now it's almost comical how she's showing up, getting her ass kicked, and then dying.
I was frankly surprised to see her not in the list in Rise of Skywalker of the cast list.
It would have been ridiculous. I feel like
it would. I understand.
It would have felt
I understand
very,
the perspective.
Like, I've been burned very badly.
It would have launched 1,000 memes for sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is I don't take that death as conclusive. We are talking about sci-fi space fantasy. She fell into an ambiguous area with some flames. When has a villain fell somewhere where you do not see their neck snap into 7 pieces? And even then, they'd be like, I was faking it. Like...
the pulpy, sure.
There's no reason that character needs to be dead. And I will, whenever people get upset about character deaths, who dies in the first Star Wars movie? Obi-Wan Kenobi. What's the Disney Plus show we're excited about? 40 plus years later, there's plenty of storytelling to be had. And I always think of Phasma very similar to Darth Maul. If you think Phasma was all over the marketing, Darth Maul was the marketing, right? He was everywhere.
But Darth Maul got to do something in Phantom Menace. Phasma does nothing.
That's a very good point. But almost everything that Maul says or expresses was in those trailers, right?
Yes, dialogue-wise.
Yeah, yes. And then he dies, and he comes back. So I guess to my point is, if you like the Phasma character and you're the kind of fan who are like, yeah, I'm happy to follow the character to books and comics and video games. I don't need it all in the movie.
Right.
I think there's a lot more Phasma storytelling to be had, and I really do hope the character is still alive because I like her origin book, Phasma.
The book is fantastic.
Yeah, so I would love it if she survived. Let's not deal with it in the movie because we don't have room for her, and it would draw Will Ferrell comparisons. But yeah, she survived, and she went and did her own thing, and here's a cool novel about Poe tracking Phasma down after the events of Rise of Skywalker or whatever.
I just was a little I still get a little disappointed because I really like that moment where the helmet's broken and we see the human behind it. It just doesn't feel earned to me because from a movie standpoint, I don't know who this character is.
Yeah.
And so to have this like on their knees, like, oh, it is a human. It's like, okay, I don't know really who you are. You're supposed to be badass and you haven't been thus far. And now you're just gone. And I think I'm almost more disappointed because I took the time to go read Phasma. I was like, this is a great character. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
It's a 2.5 hour movie as it is. There's just not enough room for another huge growth. But
there's not room for everything. And for me, again, my personal bias, this is the way of Star Wars that cool characters get advertised. Especially armored characters get more toys because they're easier to sculpt and they look cooler, right? It's a good chance the Sith Trooper, the Sith Jet Trooper, the First Order Jet Trooper will have very little screen time. And again, those are troopers. I get not a character. But I just accept that cool-looking characters are going to be pushed forward in marketing, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be main characters. and that doesn't bother me.
I don't even remember now looking back, like if I even knew that Phasma was going to be in Last Jedi.
Yeah, because at least one of the trailers had a big fight moment with
Oh,
her,
okay,
and Finn.
I just remember that slow-mo holding the rifle shot from Force Awakens.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I love the cracking of the helmet because it ties to the book if you've read it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, there are characters like DJ or Phasma who don't have their own arc but are there to service the other characters.
Sure, right.
The majority of these characters have arcs.
Yeah.
More than in original trilogy and prequel trilogy, I think, in terms of if you look at a character who's like, I'm starting from this place, I go through this extreme trauma, I learn something entirely new and have my view of myself or the world reshaped by the end. Classic definition of a character arc. And I think there's something about not only Finn's like full defeat, she is to him, as much as Rose is sort of like the face of the resistance, she is to him the face of the First Order, the face of being dominated, right?
Right.
And brainwashed is this sort of unmovable, unbreakable face. She's the one who told him he didn't have permission to take his helmet off. So for him to crack that helmet and see like something human and vulnerable underneath, I think does a lot for him. And I know some people don't like it. I love the Rebel Scum moment because for me, that's what I'm in this movie for. What I've been talking about of it challenges things.
Yeah.
And Finn on his DJ journey goes like, well, maybe the Resistance isn't any better than the First Order. So to have that triumphant moment of him literally rising and totally claiming the mantle of Rebel Scum, it's a fist pumping moment to me. I love it.
It's definitely a quote unquote trailer moment.
It is, and I understand for some people they think it's cheesy, and that's fine. Taste or taste, but I love it.
Star Wars is cheesy at heart when you really think about it in the most loving way. I think Star Wars is all about those fist pumpy, maybe corny, but in a loving way.
Oh yeah, I want to walk out of the theater feeling like Star Wars kid from the old viral video. I want to have that thrill of like, that was amazing and fantastic, and I can do that. I can be a part of that. I can question myself, and I can rise above, and I can feel confident in who I am and claiming my own power. And like that's one of the reasons that I love Star Wars. And I think there's so much in Last Jedi that, especially at the end, gets that great feeling where I want to go swing a lightsaber or drive a car fast or make a really good decision and be proud of myself. Like any different interpretation of truly feeling in yourself and confident.
So in that ranking episode of all the Star Wars movies that I did with Ken Knapsack, which is available now on this very podcast feed, I put Last Jedi almost squarely in the middle. And I think my big takeaway from Last Jedi is, and overall, I really like this movie. There are a couple things here and there I don't like. Sure. The anachronisms kind of bug me a little bit. Not enough to, the big ass door kind of like.
I was going to say big ass door is one that sticks for a lot of people.
What it is?
Door sticks.
They just go out of their way in the other Star Wars movie. Blast it, Biggs. Or that's so wizard, Annie. It's like, you there's a
They
history
also call
of...
the droids robots in the blasters a gun in A New Hope.
True. Look, all that aside, that's to say that's me nitpicking, but overall, this movie, I think the reason why this one maybe isn't like the most rewatchable or just I'm cleaning the house and I want Star Wars on, I'm not going to throw in The Last Jedi, something like Force Awakens, I would even say something like A New Hope. Those are a movie of, in my opinion, set pieces with ideas running through them. Whereas I feel like Last Jedi is a movie of ideas with set pieces sprinkled in every now and then.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is one where like I really have to like think about it, not while I'm vacuuming or texting.
I'll say Chewie and the Porgs are good for those moments. I think they get a lot of great flavor moments and all that.
But the flavor moments, I feel they're moments. Whereas there's so much more meat on this one than I feel like maybe any other Star Wars movie. I think there's still more to process. Maybe that's why we're still talking about it 2 years plus on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is meat on the bones of Attack of the Clones. But I think that this is a movie that prioritizes in every way, really putting that on the surface of this. The point of this movie is to torture and test these characters, and to torture and test the fundamental ideas of Star Wars, so they can go through hell and come out going, yes, no, I should not be the Last Jedi, and I will not be the Last Jedi. And you should play with your action figures and tell yourself stories about being a Jedi. You should take bold, daring risks, and you should act when there is something wrong, and you should stand up and you should join, you know?
What are the odds, do you think, of Rise of Skywalker maybe recontextualizing this movie for a group of people who are either on the fence or just, that's not for me?
I think it's going to a lot, because I think all movies do, right? At least, I mean, Star Wars movies. So many things get recontextualized when you watch them with the other movies. I think just because whatever the amount of actual breakdown between people who like Last Jedi, don't like it, or on the fence about it, whatever those numbers actually are, certainly the dialogue has been loud.
Right.
That I think there are going to be people who are going into it really wanting it to quote unquote retcon elements of Last Jedi. And I think there are other people who really want it to just feel like one big flowing narrative. And I think we're going to see lots of the kind of headline articles that you and I were talking about, like Rise of Skywalker proves blah, blah. I want to just be open-minded. I feel like these characters are consistent between the movies. I feel like the themes and what they're wrestling with are consistent between these two movies. I think there's going to be a different tone. I think J.J. Abrams wants to get back to a little bit more of that sense of it's about adventure and it's about companionship. But I think he's also, and Chris Terrio, the writer, are very serious about, we're looking at the big themes of Star Wars. We're going to look at the idea of what does the balance of the Force mean? We're going to look at what does it mean to only use the Force for knowledge and defense. We're going to look at it to say, have the Skywalkers left the galaxy better for having made the choices they've done, or have they only made it worse? They're going to look at all those big ideas. So I think that this is going to be a very unique Star Wars movie that is really trying to balance the adventure, serial excitement, thrilling half with but as Lucas said, this is a morality tale.
Yeah.
To help us think through who we want to be, if you want to engage with it at that level.
Man, I wish this conversation that we've had was what I could have been having for the last 2 years. But I'm really grateful that you came on to talk about this, that this hour and a half or however long it's been exists, so that the people that do want to have those conversations, this is available, because this is what Star Wars ultimately is about. It's about people talking about ideas. And I feel like we've lost that a little bit. And I don't know what's going to happen with Rise of Skywalker, but I'm glad that at least on a face-to-face value, we can still talk about this silly little space opera in a galaxy far, far away. You know?
And I want it to be like that. I want it to be able to be like, hey, did Snoke Dine work for you? Like, no, he should have got up and kicked ass. And I want it to be able to be like, hey, let's have a back and forth. I want it to be like, the fathiers are the best animal ever in Star Wars, or man, the fathiers, no, not for me. Like, it would be great. A thing that I try to say is, I feel like society kind of conditions us to state our opinions as facts. It's a stronger way to speak. If you go to certain kind of writing schools or college, they'll teach you to make a statement and then defend it. And I always think of it as, if you say to me, Snoke is stupid, and that's the truth, that closes the door. If you say to me, Snoke didn't work for me, that opens the door for me to go, why?
Yeah.
And then I learn more about you, and we don't have to agree. We get to connect, and we get to have a back and forth, and both of our opinions get to be valid. And that's my greatest hope. Not that everybody agrees on anything in Star Wars,
right,
but that we have fun talking about it. And by talking about it, we hopefully learn a little bit about one another, maybe.
Let's all force connect with each other. Maybe not while I'm in the bathroom.
No, I'm gonna appear in your bathroom tonight
as I'm brushing my teeth. Thank you so much, Joseph, for closing out what has been an amazing second season. You guys have been just so supportive, so grateful just to watch the numbers rise every week, to just chat again about movies has been so amazing. I'm not even going to tease a season 3. It's coming. I don't know when. I'm going to take a little break.
You're wise.
It's the holiday time here as of this recording. We'll be back in 2020. There's still a lot of movies, still a lot of people I want to talk to. But we did conquer a big one today. Yes. The Last Jedi very much topped the list. I hope everyone has a safe and happy holidays. And of course, enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. Enjoy Star Wars. Enjoy talking, not fighting. This season has proven more than anything we can tackle those big issues and still come out learning something about each other. You guys have taught me a lot. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you guys in season 3.